There is a quiet reason your heart felt unusually restless today, even if you could not explain it. Some moments arrive without making a sound, yet they change the direction of every thought that follows. This is one of those moments. Don't skip, because something important is waiting for you, and it has been growing quietly while you were busy living your ordinary hours. Somewhere beyond what you can see, words have been spoken about you with unexpected warmth, unexpected curiosity, and unexpected hope. They were not planned. They simply happened, as though your name found its own place in a conversation that no one intended to begin. That is why this message feels different. It carries the quiet echo of a story that started without your knowledge. Last night, while the lights in another home slowly faded and the day seemed ready to end, your presence entered the room without ever opening a door. No photograph was placed on the table. No announcement was made. Yet your name appeared naturally, almost as if it had been waiting patiently for the perfect moment. One question became another. One memory invited another smile. Every person in that room noticed something they had overlooked before. Your soulmate listened more than they spoke, because sometimes the deepest emotions choose silence before they choose words. Inside that silence, they realized they could no longer keep pretending that your place in their heart was something ordinary. You have wondered before why certain days feel unusually meaningful, even when nothing visible seems to happen. The answer is often hidden in moments happening far away from you. Hearts are connected in ways that eyes cannot measure. While you questioned whether anyone truly understood you, someone else was quietly explaining your kindness, your patience, the little qualities you rarely notice about yourself. They spoke about the way you make people feel, not the way you try to impress them. And those listening began to understand why your soulmate could never simply forget you. There was a pause during that conversation that seemed to last longer than anyone expected. It was not uncomfortable. It was thoughtful. During that silence, someone asked a gentle question that changed everything inside the room. Your soulmate did not answer immediately. Instead, they looked down for a moment, smiled softly, and took a slow breath before speaking. Their reply was simple, but it carried more honesty than anyone had anticipated. It revealed something they had hidden even from themselves for a very long time. Perhaps this surprises you because you have spent so much time believing that something lasting was quietly taking shape, and everyone in the room felt it without needing to explain why. Stay till the end, because the next part of this story begins where that conversation unexpectedly shifted. One unexpected voice entered the discussion and asked a single question that no one was prepared to answer immediately, and the response your soulmate finally gave changed the atmosphere of the entire home in a way they never imagined. Something changed the instant that question settled into the room. It was not loud, and no one rushed to fill the silence. Instead, every face turned toward your soulmate, waiting with quiet patience, knowing that whatever came next would reveal more than simple words ever could. They held their breath for a moment, not because they were uncertain, but because some truths deserve to be spoken slowly. Don't skip. The next few moments uncovered something that had been quietly growing inside them for far longer than anyone realized. Your soulmate finally lifted their eyes and smiled in a way that surprised even themselves. It was the kind of smile that appears when a person stops hiding from their own heart. Then they spoke gently. They admitted that thinking about you had become part of their everyday life. Not because they were trying to force those thoughts, but because your memory kept finding its way into ordinary moments. A familiar song. A peaceful evening. A simple conversation. Somehow, each one reminded them of you, and they could no longer pretend it was just a coincidence. The room became unusually calm. No one interrupted. Sometimes people recognize sincerity the moment they hear it. One family member leaned forward with quiet curiosity and asked what made you so different from everyone else. Your soulmate did not begin listing achievements or appearances. Instead, they described something much harder to explain. They spoke about the peace they felt whenever your name crossed their mind. They spoke about the feeling that, even during uncertain days, the thought of you somehow made tomorrow seem brighter. As those words settled into the hearts of everyone listening, the atmosphere softened. Expressions that had once been filled with questions slowly transformed into understanding. One by one, those around the table began sharing what they had quietly observed over the past weeks. They noticed how your soulmate smiled more often whenever you were mentioned. They noticed the calmness that appeared after reading a message connected to you. Even the smallest details, which once seemed ordinary, suddenly formed a picture no one could ignore. Perhaps you have been wondering whether your presence truly matters in someone's life. Sometimes the answer arrives long before you ever hear it. While you questioned your own significance, another home was slowly discovering just how deeply your story had touched someone they love. They were not discussing perfection. They were speaking about connection. The rare kind that brings comfort instead of confusion, hope instead of uncertainty. Then an older voice in the room quietly broke the silence with a sentence that caused everyone to stop and reflect. It was not dramatic. It was calm, thoughtful, and filled with quiet wisdom. Those few words lingered in the air long after they were spoken, and your soulmate could not stop thinking about them. In that single moment, they realized there was one important thing they could no longer leave unsaid. Something important is waiting for you, because what your soulmate decided to do immediately after that conversation ended was something no one in the room expected, and it became the beginning of a message they have been carrying in their heart ever since. A few quiet footsteps later, the conversation was over, but its meaning had only just begun. The room slowly returned to its evening rhythm, yet your soulmate remained where they were for a little while longer. Everyone else believed the moment had passed. They were wrong. Some conversations end with silence because the most meaningful words have not yet been spoken. Stay till the end. What happened after everyone left the room revealed what had truly been resting on their heart. Your soulmate walked toward a window where the night seemed unusually peaceful. They looked outside without searching for anything in particular, almost as if they were listening instead of looking. In that stillness, they replayed every sentence they had shared with their family. For the first time, they realized they had spoken about you without hesitation. There had been no need to protect their feelings behind careful answers. Your place in their heart had quietly become undeniable. Then something beautifully unexpected happened. A family member who had remained behind approached them with gentle kindness and said, "I've never seen you speak about someone the way you spoke tonight." Those words were simple, yet they carried enough warmth to make your soulmate pause. They didn't answer immediately. Instead, they smiled in quiet agreement, because deep inside, they knew it was true. That moment became a mirror. For so long, they had been trying to understand why thoughts of you kept returning, even on ordinary days. Now they finally understood that it wasn't about chance. It was about consistency. Your memory never demanded attention, yet it always found its way back. Every peaceful moment somehow reminded them of you. Every hopeful plan seemed to leave space for your name. They could no longer explain it away. As the evening grew quieter, they reached for something they had almost picked up many times before, their phone. Their hand rested there for a few seconds. A message could have been written in that moment. A conversation could have begun. Yet they stopped, not because they had changed their mind, but because they wanted their words to be worthy of everything they had finally admitted to themselves. There is a difference between speaking quickly and speaking sincerely. Your soulmate chose sincerity. They wanted every sentence to reflect what they truly felt, not just what sounded beautiful. They wanted you to understand that you had never been a passing thought. You had quietly become part of the future they imagined whenever life felt full of possibility. Even they were surprised by how naturally that realization had settled into their heart. Perhaps you have experienced moments when you sensed that something meaningful was unfolding, even though nothing visible had happened yet. Those quiet instincts are not always without purpose. Sometimes life prepares two hearts separately before allowing their stories to move closer together. Before the night finally came to an end, your soulmate whispered a single promise to themselves. No one else heard it. No one wrote it down. Yet that quiet promise changed the direction of every thought that followed. It wasn't a promise made out of urgency, it was made with hope, patience, and quiet certainty. Don't skip. Because by the following morning, something happened that gave your soulmate the confidence they had been searching for, and what they decided to write after waking up would become the message they had wanted to share with you all along. Morning arrived without fanfare, yet it carried a different feeling than the night before. The sunlight entered the room exactly as it always had, but your soulmate noticed something had quietly shifted within them. Some mornings begin with routine. Others begin with clarity. This was the kind of morning that gently reminds a person that certain feelings can no longer remain hidden. Something important is waiting for you, because what followed was not planned, it unfolded one quiet moment at a time. Your soulmate sat with a warm drink in their hands, allowing the silence to settle before the day became busy. Instead of reaching immediately for tasks or responsibilities, they found themselves thinking about one thing alone, you. Not with confusion. Not with hesitation. With a calm certainty that surprised even them. They realized your name had become the first peaceful thought to greet the morning, and that realization carried more meaning than they had expected. As they reflected on everything that had been said the previous evening, one sentence returned again and again. It wasn't the loudest sentence from the conversation. It wasn't even the longest. Yet it stayed with them because it felt true. They understood that the people closest to them had already noticed what they themselves had only recently accepted. Sometimes those around us recognize the direction of our hearts before we do. Without overthinking, they opened a blank message. For several moments, nothing was written. The cursor blinked patiently, almost inviting honesty instead of perfection. Your soulmate smiled to themselves, erased a few words they had started, and tried again. They didn't want to send something ordinary. They wanted every sentence to reflect what had quietly grown inside them through countless unnoticed moments. They wanted you to feel understood before they ever spoke about themselves. They began by remembering the small things. The kindness you rarely receive credit for. The calm presence you bring into ordinary conversations. The way you leave people feeling lighter without even realizing it. They discovered that when they tried to describe you, the words came more easily than they expected. It wasn't because they had rehearsed them. It was because those thoughts had been waiting patiently for the right moment to be expressed. As the message slowly took shape, another family member happened to walk by. They noticed the thoughtful expression on your soulmate's face and gently asked, "Writing something important?" Your soulmate looked up, smiled with quiet confidence, and simply nodded. There was no need for a long explanation anymore. The answer itself revealed everything. That small exchange carried an unexpected sense of peace. For the first time, your soulmate no longer felt the need to hide what their heart had already accepted. The conversation from the previous night had planted a seed of courage, and now that courage was beginning to bloom into action. Perhaps this is how meaningful changes often begin, not through dramatic moments, but through simple decisions made with an honest heart. A quiet conversation. A peaceful morning. A message written one sentence at a time. Together, they become the beginning of something that neither person could have predicted. Just as your soulmate reached the final lines of that message, the phone suddenly lit up with a new notification. It wasn't the notification itself that caught their attention, it was what it reminded them of. In that instant, they paused, read it twice, and realized there was one final truth they could no longer keep inside, and those next words would become the most personal part of the message yet. Just when the message felt complete, your soulmate's fingers stopped above the screen. It wasn't because they had run out of words. It was because one final thought remained, the one they had carried the longest, the one that had quietly waited behind every smile, every memory, and every conversation. Some truths are never difficult because they are uncertain. They are difficult because they matter deeply. Stay till the end. The next few moments brought them closer than ever to saying what had been in their heart all along. The notification that had appeared was simple, almost ordinary, yet it reminded your soulmate how quickly time moves when meaningful words are left unsaid. They looked back at the message they had written and read every sentence slowly. Each line reflected kindness. Each memory carried gratitude. But something was still missing. The message explained what they remembered about you, yet it had not fully revealed what they felt because of you. They closed their eyes for a brief moment. In that quiet pause, they remembered the very first time your name stayed with them long after a conversation had ended. They remembered wondering why your words seemed to echo through ordinary days. They remembered smiling unexpectedly while thinking about moments that no one else would have considered important. Those memories were not dramatic. They were gentle. And perhaps that is why they became unforgettable. When they opened their eyes again, they added another sentence. Then another. Not because they wanted the message to be longer, but because honesty has a way of unfolding naturally once it begins. They wrote about how your presence had quietly changed their perspective. They admitted that you had become someone they naturally wanted to share good news with, someone whose happiness genuinely mattered to them. They realized that every hopeful thought about tomorrow somehow included a place where you belonged. At that very moment, a family member happened to notice the peaceful expression on your soulmate's face and smiled knowingly. There were no questions this time. No surprise. Only quiet understanding. Sometimes the people closest to us can recognize a sincere heart without hearing a single word. That gentle smile gave your soulmate something they hadn't realized they needed: confidence. It was no longer about wondering if their feelings were real. It was about finding the courage to let those feelings be seen. Perhaps you have experienced moments when life seemed unusually quiet, only to discover later that something meaningful had been taking shape behind the scenes. While you were moving through your own days, someone else's heart was learning how to become more honest. Piece by piece. Thought by thought. Until silence could no longer hold what truth was ready to express. Your soulmate looked at the message one final time. A soft smile appeared. Not because every answer had been found, but because they finally recognized that some journeys begin with one sincere sentence. Their thumb slowly moved toward the screen. It hovered there for just a heartbeat. And in that single heartbeat, one unexpected thought entered their mind, a realization so personal that it changed the final words they were about to send. Those last few lines would carry the deepest part of everything they had been trying to say, and they would become the beginning of a new chapter that neither of you could have imagined. There are moments when time seems to slow for no obvious reason, and this was one of them. Your soulmate looked at the screen, then looked away again, allowing one final wave of reflection to settle over their heart. It wasn't hesitation. It was gratitude. They realized that before sharing their feelings with you, they first wanted to understand why those feelings had become so steady. Don't skip, because the answer surprised even them. They gently placed the phone beside them and let their thoughts wander through every season that had quietly led to this point. They remembered moments when life felt uncertain, and somehow the thought of you always brought a quiet sense of peace. They remembered days filled with responsibilities, yet your name would appear in the smallest spaces between those moments, never demanding attention, simply remaining there with quiet consistency. Then they whispered something to themselves that no one else was there to hear. I've been trying to understand this for so long. But maybe I don't need to understand every detail. Maybe I only need to be honest. Those simple words lifted a weight they hadn't realized they were carrying. For the first time, your soulmate stopped searching for perfect explanations. Feelings do not always arrive with detailed answers. Sometimes they become real because they remain constant, even when life changes around them. That realization filled the room with an unexpected calm. Later that day, another conversation unfolded at home. It wasn't planned. Someone casually asked whether there was anything exciting your soulmate was looking forward to in the coming days. Without thinking, they smiled. Not a smile meant to impress anyone. Not a smile that needed to be explained. Just a quiet, genuine smile that reflected hope. The people around them noticed it immediately. One of them laughed softly and said, "Whatever you're thinking about seems to make you genuinely happy." Your soulmate nodded. They didn't mention your name this time. They didn't have to. The warmth in their expression had already answered the question. Perhaps this is something you've forgotten about yourself, that your presence has the ability to leave lasting impressions without trying. Not through grand gestures, but through authenticity. The people who truly value you often remember the peace you bring long before they remember the words you spoke. As evening approached once again, your soulmate returned to the message waiting patiently on their phone. They read it from beginning to end, and this time, nothing felt missing. Every sentence reflected truth. Every line carried quiet respect. Every word came from a place that had been slowly growing stronger since the conversation that began the night before. Their thumb rested over the screen once more. This time, it didn't pause because of uncertainty. It paused because they wanted to remember this moment, the moment when they chose openness over silence. A gentle breath. A quiet smile. And then. And reveal a heartfelt detail that had never been spoken aloud until now. The voice on the other end carried an unusual warmth, as though the conversation had been waiting to happen since the previous evening. Your soulmate greeted them with a quiet smile, never expecting that this simple phone call would uncover one more piece of a story they believed had already been completed. Some moments arrive gently, yet they leave a lasting impression that changes everything that follows. Stay till the end, because every word spoken during this call drew your soulmate even closer to the truth they had been trying to express. The family member spoke calmly. "I've been thinking about our conversation from last night." There was a brief silence. Then they continued. "You seemed different when you talked about that person. Not different because you were emotional, different because you sounded peaceful." Your soulmate lowered their eyes and listened without interrupting. The words were simple, yet they carried remarkable clarity. "You weren't trying to convince anyone," the voice continued. "You were simply speaking from your heart. That's something we don't see every day." For a long moment, your soulmate said nothing at all. Sometimes the greatest confirmation comes not from discovering something new, but from hearing someone else gently describe what has already been growing inside you. A soft smile appeared again. Not because they finally had every answer, but because they no longer needed them. The conversation slowly drifted into quiet memories. They talked about small moments that had seemed ordinary at the time but now carried unexpected meaning. A passing mention of your name months ago. A smile that appeared without explanation. The way your soulmate would become noticeably calmer whenever the conversation somehow found its way back to you. One gentle observation made them stop completely. "I don't think your feelings started yesterday," the family member said. "I think yesterday was simply the first time you allowed yourself to say them out loud." Those words settled deeply. Your soulmate realized they were true. Nothing had suddenly appeared overnight. The conversation at home had not created these feelings. It had simply given them permission to stop hiding them. Perhaps this is how life often works. The most meaningful realizations rarely arrive all at once. They gather quietly through countless unnoticed moments until one peaceful conversation brings everything into focus. When the call finally came to an end, your soulmate remained seated for a while, holding the phone gently in their hand. The room felt unusually still, but it was the comforting kind of stillness that follows understanding. They opened the message once again. This time, they didn't erase a single word. Instead, they added one final paragraph. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't complicated. It simply thanked you, for unknowingly bringing light into ordinary days, for inspiring hope without asking for recognition, and for reminding them that the most meaningful connections are often built quietly, one sincere moment at a time. As they reached the final line, they smiled and whispered, "Now it finally says what I wanted it to say." Their thumb slowly moved toward the send button. Only a single touch remained. But at that exact moment, something unexpected appeared on the screen, something so personal, so perfectly timed, that your soulmate quietly laughed in disbelief. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a reminder that some stories know exactly when the next chapter is ready to begin, and what appeared in that instant would give them the courage to take the final step.